Hey, welcome. Today, we're diving deep into heme, the incredible microscopic powerhouse that literally gives our blood the ability to sustain life. So, yeah, let's get right into it. It's one of those fundamental questions, isn't it? It really gets to the core of how we exist. We all know blood carries oxygen, but how does it actually do it? What's the molecular machine that's responsible for this amazing feat? Well, the answer is a protein called hemoglobin. And as you can see, most of it, a whopping 96%, is a big protein structure called globin. But the real magic, the part that actually grabs onto the oxygen, is that tiny 4% slice called heme. It might look small, but trust me, without it, the whole system just falls apart. So here's our game plan. We're going to follow the entire journey of heme. First, we'll see how it's built in this complex assembly line. Then, we'll look at what happens when that line gets sabotaged, or when the genetic blueprint itself has a mistake. And finally, we'll see heme in action, doing its most famous job. Okay, first up, the heme assembly line. Now, think about this. Every single day, our bodies are cranking out about 6 to 7 grams of hemoglobin. That's about the weight of a teaspoon of sugar. And it all starts with manufacturing this one crucial part, heme, completely from scratch. So what exactly is heme? At its heart, it's a complex molecule built around a single atom of iron. The best way to picture it is as a perfectly designed molecular claw. And that iron atom is right in the center, just waiting to snatch an oxygen molecule. It sounds simple, but this one job is absolutely critical for keeping us alive. And building this thing? Oh, it's not a simple one-and-done deal. It's a super intricate 6-step biological assembly line. The cell starts with really basic building blocks and then, step by step, performs these precise chemical reactions. It builds and tweaks the structure until, at the very end, it performs the most important step, inserting that iron atom. And get this, the assembly line doesn't even stay in one place. The process actually kicks off inside the cell's power plants, the mitochondria. Then it moves out into the main body of the cell, the cytosol, for a few steps, before heading back into the mitochondria for the grand finale. It's an incredible, coordinated dance happening inside our cells. So we have this perfect, elegant system. But, perfect systems can be fragile. What happens when some kind of outside force, a poison, gets into the system and just throws a wrench in the whole operation? Well, that's precisely what happens with lead poisoning. Lead is the ultimate saboteur here. It specifically targets and shuts down 2 critical enzymes. You can think of them as essential workers on our assembly line. It gums up the works for an enzyme back in step 2, and another one, ferrochelatase, which handles that final, all-important step of putting the iron in. And the consequences of this blockage are huge. With those key workers out of commission, the entire production line just grinds to a halt. Heme production tanks, which leads directly to anemia. And just like a jammed-up factory, all the raw materials and half-finished parts start piling up, eventually spilling out into the urine. But the threat doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes the problem is written right into our own DNA. It's a flaw in the actual blueprint for the assembly line. This brings us to a group of disorders called the porphyrias. They're basically inherited defects where one of the enzymes, one of those workers on the heme assembly line, is faulty because of a genetic mutation in its instructions. And this is where things get really fascinating because it shows just how specific this system is. Just look at this table. Depending on which specific enzyme is broken, you get a completely different set of problems. A blockage early on can cause serious neuropsychiatric issues, but a jam further down the line that can lead to extreme sensitivity to light. Fun fact, some historians even think these symptoms, the pale skin, the sunlight sensitivity, maybe reddish teeth from the buildup, could have actually inspired the vampire myths we all know. And the science behind that photosensitivity is just wild. When those intermediate porphyrin molecules build up because of a blockage, they end up in the skin. Then, when sunlight hits them, they react with oxygen and create these things called superoxide free radicals. They're highly destructive molecules that basically burn the skin from the inside out, a truly terrifying biochemical reaction. All right, so we've seen what happens when the assembly line is attacked from the outside, and what happens when the blueprint is flawed from the inside. So for our last section, let's look at the grand finale. What happens when everything goes right? And heme gets to do its most important job, teaming up to form hemoglobin. But here's the crazy twist. Even if you manage to make a perfect heme molecule, the final product can still be defective if its partner, that big globin protein, has a problem. This is exactly what happens in sickle cell anemia. Just one single amino acid gets swapped out in the globin protein chain, and that tiny change causes the entire hemoglobin molecule to warp and twist, leading to those infamous sickled red blood cells. And it's not always about a flaw in the parts. Sometimes it's a simple matter of quantity. In a group of disorders called thalassemia, the problem isn't a mutation in the globin chain itself, but that the body just doesn't produce enough of one of the chains. It's a supply chain issue. So your body is supposed to make these alpha chains and beta chains in a perfect 1-to-1 ratio. But in something like beta thalassemia, you might make 100% of your alpha chains, but only save 40% of the beta chains you need. This imbalance is actually toxic to the red blood cell, making it fragile and, you guessed it, leading to severe anemia. So there you have it. From a simple chemical reaction to a complex partnership with a massive protein, the journey of heme is this incredible story of precision. And we've seen how a single mistake, whether it's from an external poison or an internal genetic flaw, can have these massive consequences. It really makes you wonder, right? This entire incredibly complex process is all spelled out in our DNA. What other secrets to our health are still hiding in these molecular blueprints?